Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is an integral supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including TIBCO, Databricks, IBM, Semantic, TidalScale, and Vertica, to name just a few. Now, past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. And if you haven't had the opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Today's webinar is entitled A Self-Service Analytics Case Study, Accelerating Speed to Insight. And before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We'll have 3 presenters that I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 or 15 minutes of QA following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation, as we'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the QA portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Philip Burrow, Raman Kaler, and Melissa Robinson. Now, Philip Burrow is a senior reporting analyst with Optum Technology, and at Optum, he's responsible for operations reporting and serves as the business intelligence liaison between line of business and the internal IT customers. Prior to Optum, Philip was in manufacturing finance at Honeywell Aerospace and professional services at the Corporate Executive Board. He holds a BS in Business Management from Maranatha Baptist University and is working toward an MBA in Business Intelligence at Concordia University. Now, Raman Kaler is an Alliance Marketing Manager at Alteryx. She focuses on defining strategy and executing programs for joint marketing efforts with key strategic partners. She currently focuses on partner marketing efforts with Amazon Web Services, Cloudera, Databricks, and Salesforce. Melissa Robinson is a solutions engineer with Alteryx, where she works with prospective customers to architect and demo the best solutions for their analytic challenges. Now, prior to Alteryx, she spent several years at IBM and Telelogic. Melissa holds a BA in International Economics from UCLA and an MS in Computer Science from Cal State University at Fullerton. So Philip, Raman, and Melissa, thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Now, Optum Technology relies on self-service analytics to balance and operationalize the size and skill of their workforce with workload analytics. That's reconciling 15,000 employees with over 5,000 IT programs, along with the data from various employee tracking systems, spreadsheets, Access databases, SQL, Hadoop, and multiple other sources. That can make for long days, errors, and stress, but that isn't the case at Optum. So in today's Data Science Central webinar, we'll discuss how Optum's senior reporting analyst, Philip Burrow, addresses these analytic challenges head-on to consolidate disparate data into data sets that can be mined for rich analysis, design repeatable, production-ready analysis with Alteryx and Tableau, provide ad hoc analysis for the operations team and executives in hours, not days, and you'll see firsthand a live demo of how Optum's analytic architecture has led to time savings, speed to insight, and quick onboarding of new analysts. So, Philip, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Thanks, Bill. I am Philip Burrow, a senior reporting analyst for Optum Technology, Workforce and Demand Management. That's a lot of words, but I will explain what all of those mean here in just a minute. First, I'll explain what Optum does, who we are, and how workforce and demand management integrates into that mission. And then I'll jump into the live or the demo of how we're supporting that mission. So Optum is a wholly owned subsidiary of United Healthcare. We are a global team of 125,000 individuals with a passion to transform healthcare. So we're tackling the biggest challenges in healthcare by partnering across the entire system. And the mission is to provide a better outcome for everyone that we serve. So what does Optum do? We are people, data, and technology coming together to create actions that provide better outcomes for our customers. So like I said, that's about 125,000 people. Those are nurses, surgeon groups, claims analysts, billing reps, IT, finance, HR. That's everyone at Optum that is coming together with a common mission to empower our customers for better outcomes. To do that, we heavily utilize data. We are a healthcare technology company, so through our data, we arrive at insights that drive decisions. So we have generations of longitudinal data, and our insights support smarter decisions that lead to better experiences, outcomes, and savings. Now, I saved the best for last, which is technology, because that's where I work. So in order to deliver these solutions at a system-wide scale, we need technology to meet our clients' changing needs while working to modernize the healthcare system. So all of the websites that you see for Optum, United Healthcare, the internal claims engines, billing applications, databases, those are all created, maintained, and resourced by Optum Technology. So really, we are an integral part of the Optum mission. So where does our team fit, the workforce and demand management team fit? So starting at the Optum level, within Optum there are different business segments, one of them being Optum Technology. Within Optum Technology, there's different functions. So we have finance, HR, project management, development, and a bunch of others, but also operations. So workforce demand management, and you see that at the bottom, it sits within operations, but we span across all of those other functions. So while we are not responsible for all the reporting for all of those functions, we dip into all of those different functions for different pieces of reporting that we need to manage the workforce and the demand that is placed on that workforce. So we provide resource, skill, and project management reporting for all of Optum Technology at a pretty high level, but we also get pretty granular. So what are we reporting on exactly? Well, since we are reporting on workforce, we are reporting on people. So who are the people that are working? What are they working on? What's in their backlog? How much are they costing? What are their skills? Lots of different flavors that the workforce reporting can take, and we do a lot of reporting around people. It's very HR focused in that respect, but we are not HR. We also do a lot of reporting on the work, or the demand as we call it. So if we have a workforce, we need something for them to work on. So we report on work. What is currently in the queue? What's in the backlog? What skills are needed to deliver it? Are we delivering it on time? What is the cost of work that we're delivering? Are we going to be hitting our revenue targets? So then the final piece of that, so workforce demand and management, the management piece is the reconciliation of the workforce and demand. Does the size and scope of the work that we need to deliver to hit our revenue targets match with the size and skill of the workforce that we have? And how can we make that better balance? So we're reporting on over 20,000 IT resources, or 20,000 people, and 5,000 plus IT programs, and those numbers are growing every day as we expand. If you remember from the previous slide of all the different functions, we're dipping into each of those different functions for parts of our reporting. Each one of those functions has different reporting platforms, data platforms, and their own reporting that we need to consolidate. So how were we doing it before Alteryx? With the workforce, again, that's more slightly HR focused. So a lot of the data that we're pulling for workforce reporting is in HR systems. So ADP, PeopleSoft, Access, and of course the ubiquitous Excel spreadsheet, or hundreds of them. So we need to get to that data. For demand, they use a lot of project management system that's more work focused. So they use project management systems, Excel spreadsheets. Importantly, they use a big data environment, Hadoop, Hive. So we are able to tap into data through the Hive. They also use a lot of sticky notes. We haven't found a way to connect Alteryx to sticky notes yet, but we're hopeful. And then the management piece. That is more finance focused, so that's a lot of data in Essbase, Access, SQL Server. They're a little bit more technologically advanced in their data and reporting than the rest of the functions. So we are able to tap into those data sources as well. The operational challenge isn't just plugging into the systems, it's plugging into these systems and pulling them together to create automated, cohesive reporting so that we can do that management piece, the reconciliation piece. So previously we were using a mix of a bunch of different things, so batch files, SSIS jobs, SQL Server, databases, VBA, Access modules. We were just doing, task scheduler. We were using a lot of different solutions. The purpose of evaluating Alteryx and going forward with it wasn't that we couldn't do the job, so it wasn't a referendum on skill sets for our team, but we just felt there was a better way, an easier way. So how we're using Alteryx then? We're consolidating these disparate data sources into single intelligent data assets. So we're pulling from Hive, from CSV, Access, SQL Server, Excel. We're pulling all of those together in Alteryx and creating single intelligent data assets that we can use for our follow-on reporting, which is a lot of it's in Tableau. Before, it was just a lot of data wrangling where we'd have to go into each individual asset, grab what we needed, and try to find a way to pull it together. With Alteryx, we can do that as part of a workflow. What that means is that we can have repeatable production-ready analysis ready at a click. So rather than having to do those steps that I just mentioned every time that we want to report for dozens or hundreds of reports, what we can do is create a visual workflow in Alteryx, save it, and have a canned workflow that we can run at a moment's notice. What this has allowed us to do now that we have our production analysis ready to go is now we can do ad hoc analysis, which it's really freed us up for the analysis piece of reporting. So if we have a central question like who are our people and what are they working on, before that was really the only question that we had time to answer. Now we can answer questions like if an executive asks, okay, I see that people are working on these things, but are people forming kind of these natural teams? Who is working with who on what? Are they forming natural teams across functions that we can leverage to get more done? So those are the types of ad hoc analysis that we can do now that we weren't able to do before. And not only that, but we can eventually productionalize those if those are valuable. So I'll jump into the use case now, and that's our headcount dashboard, headcount reporting. So I'll go over the genesis of what the request was for this, how we were doing it before, and then how we're doing it now with Alteryx and Tableau. So the original ask was from the executive level, but all the way down to the operational manager. Some really fundamental questions. How many people do we need to deliver our work? So not just how many are working on what, but how many people do we actually need? When is this work going to be completed? Are we on track to have it completed on time? And that's important because our work is tied to our revenue. We bill our hours. So if it's not done on time, then we're potentially delaying or losing out on revenue. Are we over or understaffed for that amount of work? If we're overstaffed, then we're overdriving our cost and we don't get our profit that we expected. If we're understaffed, then we may not even hit our revenue target. So it's important to understand when the work is happening and if we have enough people to deliver it. And then finally, do we have the right staff working on our projects? So this particular report had 600 plus internal customers to Optum and UHG. It was using 17 different data sources. There was 9 main outputs that were coming out of it. It was taking 2 analysts 4 hours weekly, 1 analyst to really pull the data together and package it up for later on reporting and also doing a little bit of analysis, and another analyst that was responsible for retaking the data, retransforming it for the Tableau dashboards, and producing and communicating the data. So about 8 hours weekly to produce this report. It took up a full day. We had one big, ugly Excel file that was the final output, which I'll show you a picture of it in just a second here. And it really left zero time for analysis because it was taking so long to put it together. There was no real time left to really dig into the numbers and figure out what they mean. We were kind of slapping a bunch of numbers together in a spreadsheet and handing it off and saying, here you go, figure it out. And that's not a referendum on the analysts that were pulling it together. Really, they were just doing the best that they could with what they had. But we just figured there was a better way to do it. Another big issue with this was that the spreadsheet got so large that and so complex that there was no way to do historical analysis on it. In order to do historical analysis, you had to open up 2, 3, 4, 5 different big spreadsheets and try to ping your eyes back and forth to figure out what was going on across time. So now how we're doing it, I'm sorry, with the legacy output, what it looked like was this this picture that you see here. So it's an Excel table, nicely formatted with Optum colors, but really it's just kind of a big number salad. So you could probably arrive at the number that you wanted to find, but it didn't really make sense in context. You couldn't get a sense for where you were at with compared to other people or across time. And these were the tabs that were being output. So we were combining inputs, outputs, error checks, analysis, and reporting tabs all in this big workbook. So, I mean, the fact that somebody was able to put this together is pretty incredible, but it wasn't really user-friendly for our customers because they had to do a lot of digging and searching themselves rather than reviewing insights that were found for them. So this is how we're doing it now in Alteryx, and to be honest, this probably doesn't look much better to you if you're not familiar with Alteryx yet, but I promise I will dive into the workflow and figure out what's going on for you so you can see that it is quite a bit better than the Excel legacy solution. But before I do that, I just want to go over kind of the benefits that we've seen. So we have 600 happy customers now because we are delivering insights to them. We have one main data source that's coming out of this, and that's going directly to Tableau's server. So there's no more intermediary between the analysis layer and the visualization layer. We're sending this data directly as a TDE to Tableau's server. It takes about 15 minutes weekly to produce, and that's waiting for the workflow to run, outputting all the data, and also doing some quality checks to make sure that it's good before we send out the mail that it's ready to go. There's one really awesome dashboard that people love that I'll show you in a minute, and it required zero coding experience. I just want to reiterate that my background is not in coding or technology. I was in operations and finance. This is the first technology-based role that I've held. So I don't know a lick of Python. I couldn't write a script to save my life. I know enough SQL to probably delete a table on accident, but that's about it. So the fact that I was even able to put this together, it's a testament to the learning curve of Alteryx and how easy it is to learn, as well as their user community out on their Alteryx website is really helpful. You post a question and you usually have an answer within a couple hours. By experts, as well as their help desk and their solutions engineers, even a couple times being willing to jump on WebExes with me to help me through a particularly tough challenge. Embedded within Alteryx, there's also a tutorial that you can do for almost every tool that will show you how to use the tool and when the appropriate time to use it is. So even though this looks kind of big and ugly and scary, I promise it wasn't as scary to put together as it might look. So I'll stay on this slide for just a second here. I'll jump into the workflow now so that everyone can get a better sense for what's going on. So each one of those colored boxes, those are called tool containers, and those contain different inputs in various parts of the workflow. So what we're doing here is we're taking data from Hive, Microsoft Access, SQL Server, a SharePoint list, a SharePoint library, an Excel file on a network drive, a Notepad file, and a couple other ones, and we're mashing those all together into single data assets. So each one of those boxes really represents a group of inputs. So before, whereas we would have had to open up each of those different inputs, grab the data that we need, slam them together in VLOOKUPs or databases, now we're just doing that as part of the workflow. So I'll jump into one of those tool containers here. What I want to highlight here is the data integration. So just within this small component of the workflow in this tool container, we have an Excel data source based on a SharePoint shared drive, so a SharePoint library, an Excel data source sitting on a network drive, and a SharePoint list. And by SharePoint list, I don't mean that we're pulling down a SharePoint list and exporting it to Excel and then connecting to Alteryx. We're actually using Alteryx to directly connect to the SharePoint list. So every time that list is updated, it gets reflected in this workflow upon execution. So that's really powerful for us that we don't have to open up each of these individual data sources and grab what we want. We can do that as part of the workflow, and that's been a huge time savings, upwards of 90%. Another important part that I want to highlight here is the branched workflow. So if you look at where that star just popped up, kind of in the middle left of the screen, you'll see that the workflow goes in two different directions. The first one kind of going off to the right toward the middle. What we're doing here is we're summarizing a component of the data, filtering out data that we don't need, selecting a few different fields, and then adding a formula for analysis to be used later on in the workflow. And that's all great. But if you look dropping down to the workflow branch on the bottom, what we're doing here is we're actually selecting different fields and filtering out different data and summarizing the data in a different way, and then joining it to a SharePoint list. And we're outputting that as an Excel file for data governance. What we would have had to do before is run our analytical workflow, and then somebody would have had to come back and do all these steps again to output our governance file. And we no longer need to do that. We can process both at the same time, which saves us at least 15 to 20 minutes a week just right there. So that little humble work stream that you see there is saving us 15 to 20 minutes a week. We're also doing a couple quality checks here. So these summarizations, I know what the data is supposed to look like. So by doing a summarization quality check here, I can tell whether we're in scope or out of scope, or if something's wrong with our workflow. After I put this together, I remembered that Alteryx had an email tool that I could hook on to the end of this. So if something is out of scope, I don't even need to look at this anymore. I actually get an automated email that tells me that something's wrong, and I can go in and check the workflow, which is a quality and a time savings, which is great. A couple more components of the workflow here. So we're doing some data cleanup. This data source here, it's coming in from our Hive environment, our data lake. And how our Hive environment works for this particular case is it's going out and it's scooping up an S-base Excel file. And how it's working is whatever the file looks like, it's scooping up that file. On this particular spreadsheet, there are 14 rows, 14 header rows that we don't need, and they really hinder our process, because before what we needed to do is we needed to open up the file, delete the rows, rename them, and then save the file, and then re-upload it back to Hive. Now what we do with Alteryx is we connect directly to the Hive table in our data lake, and there's a tool called a sample tool. And that allows us to actually strip out those headers that we don't need anymore and then dynamically rename, so automatically rename the fields to the names that we want using the first record of data. So just right there, that saves us probably 10 minutes. Those two little tools right there probably save us 10 minutes on our workflow, and it increases our quality. And then we're transforming the data from wide to long. The S-base file that's being output into Hive, each month is a column. It's its own field. What we needed for our Tableau reporting was for each month to be a record. So we needed the data set to be long and not wide. So this transpose tool does that for us. It's similar to the transpose tool in Excel, but a lot more powerful, and it's part of an automated solution now. And then finally, in this portion of the workflow, we're creating dynamic calculations to determine actuals for a given month. So we have this concept of actuals versus forecast. And what we wanted to do here was, rather than have to go into each of these individual inputs and say what was an actual and what was a forecast, we wrote a couple calculations that incorporated our business logic to determine what was an actual month and what was a forecast month. And then we feed that to the rest of the workflow. So every data source that comes in based on the logic in these two formulas here gets assigned whether it's an actual or a forecast. And that allows us to do historical and forward-looking analysis. And then the final piece of the workflow that I'll show is our dynamic data input. There was one file that was particularly problematic because it was saved weekly, and every time it was saved, the file name changed with a date. And so the date was appended to the end of the file name. In the Excel version of this reporting that we were doing, that meant we had to go update our formulas to reflect the new file name each week. And there was no way to automate it because this file might be produced on a different day each week. So what Alteryx allowed us to do is this directory input. So all you do, it sounds complicated, but it's not. All you do is you put this directory tool on the workflow, you browse to the file that you're looking for, and then I simply deleted the end of the string of the file name. So now anytime that a file name that starts with a DIM is in this network drive, Alteryx will automatically pull it in for me, and I don't need to worry about updating formulas or messing around with any code to do that. So this was a big quality savings and time savings as well. So hopefully you're getting the theme of time savings and quality savings. So while those two things are great, there's actually even more. It's not just quality and time savings, but it's actually allowing us to deliver a lot more business insight than we were able to do before. So how we do that is part of the Alteryx workflow, like I mentioned, is the ability to output directly to Tableau server. So we're putting the data out directly onto the server, no more intermediary between Alteryx and Tableau. So every time that this workflow gets executed, it automatically pushes to the dashboard and updates the dashboard. So output to Tableau server. We're also doing a couple more outputs, so raw data dumps. If somebody wants to do follow-on reporting, we do allow that. We don't encourage it, but we do allow it. So all of the data gets pushed out to a shared drive that everyone can access so they can do their own reporting. And this dynamic documenting, so this is a field info tool. And what this does is it takes every field that's in your work stream at the end of the work stream, and it tells you what the field is, what type of field it is, whether it's an integer or numerical or whatever. It gives you that information, and if it's a calculation, it actually tells you what the calculation is. So you don't even need to go back and review your workflow. For instance, if somebody asks you what makes up total baseline revenue, you can just click on this and say, here's the calculation that makes up total baseline revenue. So that's been pretty important for us as well. So the full workflow takes 2 minutes, and we can run it daily now if we wanted to instead of weekly. So as data gets updated throughout the week and we want fresher insight, we can now run this daily. So through this, we're doing analysis that just was not possible before. We're doing historical trended data analysis based on people, work, and financials. So I want to orient you to this Tableau dashboard that I'm showing you. So this is a variance distribution. So each of these points is a week's worth of data. So that we were not able to do before. So each week that we were running this report in Excel, each week was kind of a standalone report. What we're able to do now is aggregate all of that data into a single data source. So each one of these little circles is a week's worth of data. And what we're trying to do here is show what your variance is between your actual headcount and the headcount that you need to deliver your work. So if you look in the middle of that top chart there, it's kind of faint, but you see a 0 line. And that's right where you want to be. Each week, you want to be right around that 0 line, which would say we have exactly the amount of people that we need to deliver our work. If you look in the second swim lane here, it actually looks like there's only a couple dots, but there's not. I think there's 11 dots right there. But this particular leader, his variance is really tightly grouped around that 0 line. So every week he's coming in right about where he needs to for his headcount. And it's hovering right around that 0 line, and it's really tightly grouped. So he has a really stable workload and a really stable workforce. Contrast that with the fifth swim lane over here. You can see there's quite a bit of variance. So every week his headcount variance is changing, and it's changing pretty substantially. So what's more, he's chronically under that 0 line, which means that he does not have enough people to deliver the work that he has committed to. So we are at risk for missing our revenue targets. If you look a little bit closer, you can see that the top dot there is orange. And the orange means that it's the current week. So this leader can come in here, look at this dashboard and say, okay, I'm chronically understaffed. My variance is all over the place, but we are moving in the right direction. We are moving closer to that 0 line for the current week. So to me, this is what business intelligence is. It's taking all those 17 data sources, consolidating them into historical views, and allowing a leader to come in here and look at a glance where his variances are and if he's getting better or worse. And what's more, he can actually drill into the department and program level. So if he wants to get even more granular than this, he's able to drill into that. Down on the bottom, there's a historical trend line. So if you want to see it in a more traditional view going across time, then you can do that as well. But I tend to prefer the top view because it really shows the volatility. The second view that we were able to create across this data was our how many people we have versus what we need, and then the types of revenue that are making up the work. So if you look over to the bar chart on the left, the height of the bar corresponds to the amount of revenue that we're expected to deliver. And the color of the bar is the revenue type. So we have different types of revenue that make up our revenue streams, like many of you do, I'm sure. The height of the bar then also equals the amount of people that we need to deliver that work. So if you look at the bar, the second bar, that's our second quarter, it shows that we have more work to deliver than we did in Q1. But if you look at the color orange, the dark color, that's revenue that we have a lot of confidence in. That's work that's already been built out into our project management system, and we know that it's real work. The gray color, that's work that we have less confidence in. So it's just kind of a bucket of money that's sitting out there that we haven't really decided what we're going to use it for. So even though it looks like we have more revenue that we're going to deliver in Q2, that's not necessarily the case because we don't have a lot of confidence in that work. So before, we were not able to see anything like this. We weren't breaking down the revenue type like this, and we weren't breaking it down into quarters. It was just one big annual lump sum, so we didn't have any of this insight. If you look over at the right, there's those green bars. Those actually are directly correlated to the bars that are on the left. You can see they have the same shape. I removed the revenue color because what I want to focus on here isn't the revenue type, but the amount of people that we need. How does that compare with the actual number of people that we have, which, if you remember, was the fundamental question of this dashboard. So if you look at the green bars compared to the green line, that will tell you whether you have more work or less work than you need, more people or less people than you need. So if you look at that second bar, the Q2 bar, that's showing you we have more work than we have people to be able to deliver it. And those little people on the bottom of that view is the amount of variance. So what we would have done before is maybe go hire a bunch of contractors to make up the difference of that work, right? But we can do two things with this view now. We can look over at the left and say, okay, we do have more work that we're saying we're going to deliver, but we don't have a lot of confidence in it. So maybe we're not going to deliver it. Maybe it does not make sense to go hire a bunch of contractors and increase our cost for work that may never materialize. The second, and I'd say more important thing, is you can look at Q3 and Q4 now and say, hey, we're actually not having enough work for Q3 and Q4. So if some of this work does materialize and we need to deliver it all, maybe we can shift it over to Q3 and Q4 and level out our workload. So rather than get in the boom and bust cycle of hiring contractors and laying people off to deliver work that may never materialize, now we can look across time and say, hey, maybe we can just shift some of this work if it materializes. So those are two really well-received views that we've been able to create just off the data that we produced in Alteryx. So more internally, what it's meant for the analysts on our team, this is a real analysis that we did, a time analysis that we did on the workflows that we automated. So these are 12 workflows that we automated that were taking 44 hours a week for us to do. And now we have it down to 4 hours. And really what that represents is just the amount of time that it takes the workflow to run. So we've achieved a 90% reduction, or the equivalent of one person per week in the amount of time that it's taking to produce these analyses. So we spend a lot less time moving data and a lot more time delivering insight. So what it's meant for analysts. So we have a lot more speed to analysis now. So our key decision makers throughout the business, not just even on our team, are relying on our team a lot more heavily because of how quickly we're producing accurate reporting. It's being noticed. For instance, an IT director personally requested that our team provide reporting on key metrics for an executive. So she saw the work that we were doing with Alteryx and Tableau and liked it enough to the point that they asked if we wanted to produce a metrics dashboard for an executive. That really doesn't have a whole lot to do with what we do in our day job, but they knew that we could produce it quickly and accurately, and so we were willing to take that on. It just really raised the profile of our team. It's really easily teachable, so we have a recent college grad program where we have people that come out of college that don't have any knowledge of our systems, our processes, our softwares, and we plug them into our teams for 6 months. And the point is to get them caught up on all this stuff. So what we can do with Alteryx is we can sit them down in front of an Alteryx license and say, okay, here's a Alteryx workflow that we're running. Here's Google. Here is the Alteryx community group. Dig into this workflow, figure out what's going on using the resources at your disposal, figure out what process is running, where we're grabbing the data from, and what insights we're trying to deliver. And what's been really rewarding to see is those recent college grads coming back to us after 3 days of not really understanding anything about Optum at all and being able to articulate what's going on with these business processes and even suggest improvements. So that should just be a testament to how easily teachable Alteryx is and how easy it is to learn. Does not require a coding background. And the visual workflow has been really vital to understanding the process intricacies. We don't have the black boxes anymore of code that people don't understand or VBA that's kind of hidden behind the scenes. We can see every single step of the process that's going on and really dig into the data at every step. So the results, we've saved over 50 hours per week now. We've automated over 20 processes in the last 6 months. The return on investment for us was about 6 weeks. And so that's the amount that we paid for the licenses versus the time savings that we've been able to deliver. And we've learned that anyone can learn and run Alteryx. The external benefits to our team, we've just been able to deliver so many new insights into resource mix, workload balance, cost of delivery, and we just have some really happy customers. In the future, we're going to start leveraging the predictive analytic functions of Alteryx. We have not used those yet, but now we have people on the team that can. So questions like, can historical workload predict future workload? What are the drivers of future workload? Does increased workforce capacity, so does more people mean that we can increase our revenue, or does that just increase cost without the benefit of revenue? So we're hoping to answer those questions in the very near future. And then we also want to take care of the scheduling and server components, so how we can leverage Alteryx Server to manage data assets, disseminate information, and schedule our workflows. So that is all that I had. I know there's going to be a question and answer session at the end. I'll be happy to take your questions then. But for now, I will turn it over to Raman from Alteryx.
First and foremost, thank you, Philip, for that fantastic presentation. I think you did a wonderful job of really highlighting the value of both Alteryx and Tableau together. So thank you again for that. Next, I'd like to provide a brief overview of Alteryx and our partnership with Tableau so that you have a bit more context surrounding the winning analytics stack utilized at Optum that Philip just covered. So Alteryx is a leading platform for self-service data analytics. It enabled analysts to use a repeatable drag-and-drop workflow to easily prep, blend, and analyze all of their data, be it on-premises or in the cloud. With Alteryx, analysts can deploy and share their analytics at scale for deeper insights in minutes, not weeks. All of this empowers analysts and line of business users to perform their own analytics quickly, to process large volumes of data fast, and then output results to all popular formats, including Tableau, which you will shortly see in our live demo. Apologies as I build out the slide here. What's more, with Alteryx, you can use the same workflow to enrich your data if need be. We have relationships with leading providers of third-party data so that you can augment your data with additional insight to create the perfect data set for your analysis. Regarding our advanced analytics, the predictive capabilities are based on the R language. These tools require no coding expertise, but if you do have R programmers, they can customize these tools or even create their own tools to be reused in Alteryx. Our spatial analytic tools utilize data from TomTom to build trade areas based on drive times or other variables to do sophisticated location or geospatial analysis. Finally, Alteryx makes it easy to share the business insights that you produce. With the legacy analytic approach, analytic apps and reports often have to be created in another environment or custom coded. With Alteryx, this step is simply added to the end of the workflow to enable reporting, output data for visualization in Tableau and other popular viz platforms, or create analytic apps that allow business decision makers throughout your organization to customize and run their own analytics without having you create custom reports. As for our partners at Tableau, they realize that within the vast amount of data available to us, there are huge opportunities for advancement. But to turn opportunities into reality, people need the power of data at their fingertips, as you know. Tableau does just this. With Tableau, you go from generating powerful data-driven insights in Alteryx to sharing them directly with others in your org for consumption in a beautiful and useful manner. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Melissa so that you can see Alteryx and Tableau in action. Melissa?
Thank you, Raman. I would like to remind everyone to maximize your slide view, and the control is in the upper right-hand side so you can have a clear view of the demonstration. I'm going to go over building a workflow in Alteryx, taking data from several different sources, blending and prepping that data, and outputting it to Tableau. To get started, at the top we have our toolbars available to us for building out a workflow and our canvas area in the middle. The tools are categorized, color-coded by their function. We have tools for input and output, inputting data and outputting data to and from our Alteryx workflow. Structured data, unstructured data, data in a database server, in a flat file, or data on the cloud. Then we have several tools for prepping and joining data together, transforming data, reporting. We have spatial analysis capabilities for doing drive time and drive distance, for example, between a customer and their store. And then we have a vast predictive analytics suite where we can investigate the data to understand the data we have, if we have any outliers, if we need to consolidate data, and then move into our predictive analytics suite for predicting a future state based on our historical data. To get started, I'm going to drag and drop an input data tool onto our canvas and configure this input to select a file, a flat file, or a table on a database. This example, I'll take a flat file format. We can select and import the data from flat file formats such as Excel, CSV, Access. In this case, I have data coming in from a CSV. My order data to understand transactional information for my customers. On the left, I see a preview of this data where I have customer ID, order ID, and information about that order. I want to understand how this data is coming into Alteryx. I'm going to drag and drop this select tool to select the fields coming in from that CSV. Looking at the CSV, I can see all of the fields coming in as a flat file string structure. I have some fields that are unit price, quantity for quantitative measurements, where I can change the type from a string to a double numeric type using the select tool. So I'll take those quantity, change it to double numeric type. For the store number, for example, I can do a rename and rename any fields. Here I'll rename to store_ID for common naming conventions. Now I want to take this data and I want to blend it with another data source. So looking at my customer transactional information, I want to see what products my customers are purchasing. I have this related product ID column on the left. I want to use this ID to blend data from another source. So I'm going to take another input source, drag and drop another input data source, and take information from my SQL server. We can also connect to Oracle, Hadoop, or other database sources using an ODBC or OLEDB connection. In this case, I have a local SQL server where I'm going to take data from my product data table, given the right access permissions. I can use the visual query builder to visually build out a SQL code and gain access to query my table on my database without the need to create the code using that visual query builder. I can use existing SQL code by cutting and pasting or using stored procedures on the server. So here I'll take my product data, look at a sample on the left, and use that product ID column to blend data together. I'll blend data together using this join, drag and drop my join. And there are several ways to join data. This is joining data from two different sources on a common field, product ID. I can join data from two or more sources using join multiple. I can stack data using union. I can do a find and replace that's similar to a VLOOKUP in Excel. Or I can use fuzzy match to find my customers and find non-identical duplicates from my customer records using customer names or addresses, for example. Now I'm going to add browse tools to view this data at this level. And I'm going to hit run. And this is the first time I'm running the workflow up at the top. Alteryx is a runtime environment. It's a Windows desktop application for building out your workflow and doing your ad hoc analysis. When you hit run, it is bringing the data from those external sources into memory for processing. Alteryx doesn't persist data, so the source is left untouched. Now we can continue analyzing this data. Now looking at the resulting J, the inner join, shows me all of my order data with related product IDs. And we have fallout on the right-hand side, which shows me all of my products that have not been ordered. So these are all of the product data without matching orders. And I have a data set preview on the bottom showing my results and showing that data that I can maybe output this data at this level, showing all of my products that haven't been ordered. Moving through, I can look at the results of the inner join. I can have access to any of the fields, like the discount field, for example. Looking at that discount field and looking at the data quality on the left, I can see how many null values are in that field. I can see how many unique values. I can see really looking at the profile of the quality of this data source, thereby identifying any outliers and really investigating my data before moving on. I can quickly go through and add a data cleanse to clean up any nulls with blanks for string values or any numeric values with nulls. I'll add zeros. This also cleans any leading and trailing white space that comes in. Once that's cleaned up, I could add a formula to populate a formula on my canvas here. And I'll add the formula of on the left, where I can quickly add a formula to an existing column or add a new column. Here I'll add a new column called total sales. And add the function or the formula, and the formula would be the quantity times unit price. And as you see, as I start to type in, it does give me a drop-down list of available fields that I could create those formulas on. I'm going to change this total sales data type to a double and hit run to run my workflow. Now I've added to the right, I've added the total sales. I've added the total sales output to the right-hand side. And this now quickly adds additional formulas to my data set. Now I'd like to go ahead and do an aggregate of my data using this transform. We could quickly aggregate data. I'll drag and drop the summarize. And the summarize tool allows us to group our fields. I'd like to group my fields by those product categories. So here on the left-hand side, I'll select product category and select group by to make a unique group of my product categories and my order dates. So I'll select order date as well and select group by. And then take that new total sales formula and this time add it as a summary and create a summary of total sales. Now this allows me to add formulas to any of my fields, numeric formulas, math formulas, string formulas. And then I will run my workflow. Now on the bottom I have my resulting data set that shows my product categories. For each unique product category and order date on the bottom, I have a summary of total sales. So I have a quick way of aggregating my data. I can change the orientation and transpose my data or pivot the orientation quickly. If I would rather like to see my product categories in the column headers, I'll drag and drop this cross-tab tool where I'll take my order dates and group my data on the left by order date. Then I'll select the column headers to be my product categories, and I'll select the value for my columns to be total sales. And then I'll run my workflow again to show the resulting data set on the bottom. And that data set is now showing my same data set, but now in a different orientation. So quickly taking multiple sources of data, changing the orientation of data. Now we have our order dates, and for each order date, I see the category of sales from a retail example from furniture sales to office supplies to technology in a different view. Now for outputting this data, I could output this data to a .pde for outputting to Tableau. I could output my data set, resulting data set, to a flat file format from Excel to Access. I could also output to a database given the right access permissions, but I'd like to show the Tableau connection to output directly to a Tableau server. We can publish to Tableau server at this point by dragging and dropping my publish to Tableau server. And on our website, we do have a Tableau starter kit that allows you to download this publish to Tableau server, as well as some sample workflows for walking through examples for building a workflow in Alteryx and publishing to Tableau. On the left, for this publish to Tableau server tool, we can configure the connection. And I can configure the connection by selecting the Tableau server and my authentication, thereby running the workflow and outputting that resulting data set that I've cleaned up and blended from several sources and published out to Tableau. Okay, now I would like to end the demonstration and now pass the control back to Raman for next steps.
Thank you, Melissa, for that super helpful demo. It was much appreciated. As a next step, please visit us at alteryx.com/TableauKit to download your free 14-day trial of the Alteryx Designer. With the kit, you'll get pre-built Alteryx workflows that output to Tableau, making it that much easier to get hands-on experience with the platforms. An email containing this URL will also be sent to all webinar attendees as a follow-up. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Bill for Q&A. Thank you.
Well, Raman, Philip, Melissa, thanks for that excellent presentation. And we'll get started with today's Q&A session. I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in during the presentation. So we'll do our best to get through them all in the time remaining. And during this QA session, I'll leave up this slide with contact information for Philip, Raman, and Melissa. So if you would like to contact them following today's webinar, you'll be able to do so. So in general, I would say the audience has two categories of questions. The first are basically, Philip, man, there were a lot of changes in your life and your environment as a result of installing Alteryx. The second batch are technical in nature. So let's start with Philip about your experience. Can you start by just describing the scale of this? How many data sources were you connecting to? Have you run into any size limitations? How much data are you running through Alteryx on a regular basis?
So this particular workflow had 17 data sources, and it was running through about 2 gigs of data at one point. We did not run into any sort of size limitations. Conversely, when we were running some of this through an Access database, the ODBC connection was timing out, but Alteryx is processing it so fast that we've never ran into any sort of size or time limitations.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. Now, obviously, with any new software, there's a learning curve, so the audience has asked, you know, how long did it take to come up to speed? How long before you felt comfortable and productive using Alteryx to do all the things that you've gotten it to do?
You know, I feel like there's just so much more to learn that I hesitate to say that I'm completely up to speed on it, but really the learning curve was a lot shallower than I had expected it to be, not knowing really anything about data management or anything like that. So I would say after about 3 weeks, I was comfortable building out production workflows on pretty simple processes that were just replicating existing workflows. And within about a month and a half to 2 months, I was able to create workflows which we weren't replicating anything but creating processes from scratch.
Well, that's terrific. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Did you have any pushback from your IT group? Are there any tips you could offer about how to get the IT group to help or welcome installing this stack?
No, we didn't really have any pushback. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of redundancy to some of our other systems that we're using, but really through just demoing similar use cases to what I'm doing now, we're able to show them that there's added benefit on top of some of the redundancies to some of the other software platforms that we're using.
Okay, all right. Well, let's turn our attention to perhaps some more technical questions. Philip, this one's also probably for you. And that is, I know that you can blend some data in Tableau, and obviously Alteryx is easily able to blend. How do you decide what data is to be blended in Alteryx versus to be blended in your Viz platform like Tableau?
It really depends on the ask. So if it's a very simple dashboard, maybe that's just using 1 to 2 data sources, and we know that we can do it easily in Tableau without causing performance limitations, then we try to do it in Tableau. If it's a really complex dashboard that has maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, or 17 data sources, the performance in Tableau, I think, would really suffer at that point. So we try to do all the data manipulation, all the conditions, queries, all of that within Alteryx and really push it to the source data level so that when we get it into Tableau, it's really just a reading of essentially a flat file, and then performance is greatly enhanced. I mean, we've rebuilt dashboards that were based on all Tableau data sources. Now we're using Alteryx within Tableau Server, and you're seeing speeds that are cut by 10x.
Remarkable. And you know, you did on one of your slides equate your investment in Alteryx to a number of man hours. Can you tell us a little more specifically about your investment? What were the price of the licenses that you invested in, and what did that come up to in dollar terms?
I can actually jump in on that one. So in terms of pricing, if anybody would like to learn more about Alteryx licenses, you can actually visit alteryx.com/products/pricing. So it's right there under the products bucket. All of that is outlined very clearly there for you.
Oh, terrific. Well, thank you very much. And Philip, just to be clear, are you using the server version, Alteryx Server?
At this point, we are not. We are using Alteryx Desktop plus Scheduler.
Oh, interesting. And you're able to accomplish all of this just in desktop mode?
Yes, just in desktop mode.
Does it appear that you'll be moving to server? Is there an advantage to you for moving to server?
Yeah, there's a huge advantage for us to move to server, especially managing all of our data sources, just consolidating them all into one data platform and then calling them from that platform. So we're not having to manage multiple data platforms, as well as the scheduling component that would reside on server. So rather than somebody have to be logged in to Alteryx Desktop like we do now to run the scheduler component, if we had it on server, then we would be able to just execute them on a schedule without anybody being logged in. So then I could go on PTO.
Oh, terrific. Yeah. Take the long weekend. Now, perhaps we could have Raman and Melissa comment. You know, you talked a little bit about the predictive analytic capability that's available in the platform, and I know that Philip was looking forward to using it in the future, but maybe you could speak for just a minute about those capabilities that are available.
I can take that one.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it in the workflow, and really the first step is to clean up your data, blend your data, and then once your data is ready for analytics, we have predictive analytics for predicting something in the future based on what happened in the past. For example, predictive models for classification and regression models, logistic and linear regressions. We have A/B testing capabilities for designing and executing a test. For example, identifying the effect of a marketing campaign on sales, so doing that execute and test. Time series for forecasting future periods, for example, forecasting sales or supply chain. There's a predictive grouping category, for example, for doing market basket analysis or find nearest neighbor to discover co-occurrence. And then finally, we have our latest category of prescriptive analytics, and that's for optimization with linear programming and simulation with Monte Carlo. And that prescriptive category really helps augment the output of any predictive models by prescribing an optimal action.
Well, thank you. And Philip, Raman, Melissa, thank you so much for some great answers to some very good questions. For those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Philip, Raman, and Melissa and the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. If you would please mark your calendars for June 20th, and that's our next DSC webinar, which will be Level Up Your Data Science Team, to be presented by IBM. Also, remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship and our speakers today, Philip Burrow, Robin Kaler, and Melissa Robinson, for their insights into today's topic. Now, my name is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on June 20th. Have a great day.